The power rule is the primary method for finding the derivative of any function in the form x to the nth power. It requires two steps. Bring the exponent down to act as a coefficient, then subtract 1 from the original power. We'll start with basic integers and move on to fractions and negative exponents. We're going to start off simple here with f of x as x to the fifth power. So when we're taking the derivative using the power rule, first thing you're going to want to do is bring that 5 down in front of the x to act as a coefficient, and then subtract 1 from the exponent you had before. So 5 minus 1 we know is 4. And that's all. We now have the derivative. Next, we're going to step up the difficulty just a touch. We're going to talk about what you do if you have a leading coefficient in front of the x. So say you have 5x to the third power. Alright, using the power rule to solve for the derivative, the first step here we'd bring down the 3, but in this case you'd have to multiply it by 5. So we'd get 15x, and then same as before, you take the exponent minus 1. So 3 minus 1 we know is 2. So 15x squared is our final derivative. It gets a little trickier, but it's the same idea if you have a fraction in the exponent. Say we have the function 3x to the 1/3. Alright, and we wanted to take the derivative using the power rule. First thing you do is multiply 3 by 1/3. So we know that would just be 1 x, and then same step as before, you take the exponent and you minus 1. So 1/3 minus 1, right, I'll write that out here. 1/3 minus 3/3, right, which is 1, would be the same as negative 2/3, right? So that would be our exponent. To write this in more simple terms, we could just write 1 over x to the 2/3, as a negative exponent is the same as the reciprocal. Let's try another example with a fraction in the exponent. So say we're given the function f of x equals 8x to the power of 5/4. Alright, so using the power rule here to find the first derivative, we would multiply our leading coefficient by the exponent. So 8 times 5 is 40, and then we have to divide 40 by 4. So we know that we'd get 10 as our new leading coefficient, right? 8 times 5/4 x, and then as far as the exponent, we would do 5/4 subtract 1, but another way to write 1 is 4/4, and then since we have the same denominator, we can just subtract the numerators. 5 minus 4 is 1, keep the same denominator, 1/4. So 10x to the power of 1/4 is the first derivative of this function. Next, we're going to talk about how you can find the derivative of a power function with a negative exponent. So let's give 3x to the negative 4th power as our example. Alright, we can still use the power rule here. It's just that we're multiplying that exponent, which is a negative, by our leading coefficient, so we're going to end up with a negative result because we're multiplying a negative by a positive value. So 4 times 3 is 12, negative 12 would be our leading coefficient of the first derivative. A common point of confusion here is that people start moving too fast, and they think that the exponent should be negative 3. But that's wrong. When you have negative 4 and you're subtracting 1 from it, you end up with negative 5 as the exponent. We can also rewrite this as negative 12 over x to the 5th power, because like I said before, if you have a negative exponent, it's the same as just taking the reciprocal. Alright, let's walk through one more example, and then I'll give some practice problems. So let's say we're given the function f of x is equal to negative 5x, and let's make it a negative fraction as the exponent. So let's say negative 1/10. All right, how would you use the power rule to find the first derivative? So first thing you're going to want to do, same thing we've been doing, multiply the exponent by the leading coefficient. But now we have negative 1/10 multiplied by negative 5/1. All right, and we know that when we have fractions, we can just straight multiply across. We know that a negative times a negative would give us a positive, so negative 5 times negative 1 would give us positive 5, and 10 multiplied by 1 would just give us a denominator of 10. And we know 5/10 is just half. All right, so our leading coefficient for the first derivative would be 0.5. All right, and then as far as the exponent goes, we would take negative 1/10 and subtract 1, which we could rewrite as 10 over 10. All right, so here, if we're taking negative 1 and subtracting 10, right, we know we'd get negative 11, and we'd keep the same denominator as 10. So our exponent is negative 11 over 10, which we know we can rewrite as 0.5 over x to the 11/10. And that's it. That's the first derivative of this negative 5x to the negative 1/10 function. All right, I've put up some practice problems here. Try to find the first derivative of the functions on the left here to make sure you understand the power rule. And I'll put up the answers in a minute. Feel free to pause the video as you work through them. All right, here's the answers shown. Now comment down below if you have any questions. That's it for this video.